He had savagely torn his own vocal cords due to screaming excessively. It began as an invention by the Soviet scientists, a new gas meant to keep soldiers awake. By day 15, the real horror started. This is what the world never saw. In World War II, 5 prisoners of war were promised freedom for enduring 15 days without sleep in a Soviet gas chamber. But on day 10, what they said through the mics would send chills down your spine. This is the most horrific experiment ever conducted in human history, the Russian sleep experiment. For the first day, nothing unusual happened. The prisoners were feeling upbeat, and they had even started striking up conversations with each other about what they would do after this whole experiment, and everything stayed this way until halfway through the week. Then conversations turned bald and dark. They began confessing traumas, whispering paranoid suspicions, crying through the mics in the gas chamber. This whole thing would continue on to the next week. On day 10, however, researchers saw a sudden shift in behavior from all the test subjects. One guy began screaming and cussing at the chamber windows and began scratching himself for 3 hours straight. In fact, when the screaming stopped and the researchers looked at him through the porthole, they saw that he was trying to scream but couldn't. As it later turned out in the autopsy, this guy had physically torn his own vocal cords from all the excessive screaming. The other test subjects didn't react, as if they didn't even notice him. They began ripping pages from books, soaking them, and sticking them against the portholes, blocking the view from the researchers. The only information the researchers could now get was from the sound in the chamber, which had now become completely silent. For the next 3 days, there was total silence. No movement, no sound. As the researchers started determining what their next step should be, they constantly monitored the oxygen levels, which showed that indeed there were 4 to 5 people still alive, but nothing else until day 14. The researchers determined that either their microphones were broken or something was going on with the subjects. So, they decided to use the intercom to talk to the test subjects and inform them that some people will come inside the chamber to test the microphones and make sure that they are okay. The researchers even said they, if complied, then they would grant one of them immediate freedom. After a couple minutes of silence, one of the subjects whispers through the mic saying, "We no longer want to be freed." The researchers were a little startled, but now they knew their mics were working and at least one of the subjects was alive. They ultimately decided to not go in the chamber. On day 15, near midnight, the researchers determined that the experiment was not giving any promising results, so they decided to end the experiment early. They replaced the experimental gas, which up to this point was continuously being supplied into the room, with fresh air. As soon as they did that, screams erupted in the chamber. The subjects started screaming into the microphone and begging the researchers to turn the gas back on. And then they opened the chamber and saw it for the first time in 5 days. What they saw with their own eyes was straight out of horror scene. 4 out of the 5 subjects were alive. The 5th subject, who had perished at some point, had chunks of his flesh torn off. Stuffed into the drain, they had turned on the water in the chamber, which had flooded the whole chamber with 4 inches of murky water. The other subjects also had chunks of their flesh missing, which was later determined to be self-inflicted. Not only were they taking their own flesh off, but also eating it. Even though the chamber still had a whole month's supply of food, the subjects did not want to leave the chamber, and they kept begging for the gas to be turned back on. The research team was forced to call soldiers to help extract them out of the chamber. Immediately, as the soldiers entered the chamber, 2 subjects attacked, killing a soldier by biting onto his neck, and one of the attackers ruptured his spleen amidst extraction, causing him to die too. All 3 of the remaining prisoners were later taken down for surgery. As the doctors were getting ready to administer the anesthetic, the subject kept pleading to be put back on the gas. This continued until the anesthetic dosage did its job, which was 10 times the normal amount given. In a couple minutes, the subject fell asleep and died. Next, they bring in the test subject with the torn vocal cords, and who can't talk, so he shakes his head, basically saying not to put him under surgery. In fact, he was so scared that he passed out and died on the spot. The last guy was not put under surgery, but instead, the researchers decided to put him back in the chamber and turned the gas back on. In preparation for the transfer, they put an EEG on him, and they noticed that his brain activity would inexplicably flash and then come back on. One of the researchers near the subject looked at his face when his EEG kept flashing, and he saw that whenever the subject closed his eyes, his brain would stop working. When the time came around to transferring the subject to the chamber, he had already died. His EEG just before his death showed that he had fallen into a deep sleep before his brain stopped, and that was it for the most horrific human experiment ever recorded. Whether truth or creepypasta, this tale echoes the darkest human experiments of World War II. It serves as a chilling reminder, sleep is not optional, and some horrors are seated in our own minds. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next one.